Hi everyone, and welcome to Stronger Together in Manchester amid the Covid-19 pandemic. We're very excited and grateful to be here with you today. However much engaging online isn't as exciting as engaging in person with the absence of food and drink, we hope all our viewers are safe and well and will enjoy the discussions and programme we have lined up for you all today. Now, Ramadan is a special time for us at the Dialogue Society. We try hard to tune in the message and significance of a cohesive society in all the work we do throughout the whole year. But this is represented especially in Ramadan through our attempt to be Ramadanified, to become unified across all our convictions. Our faiths, our beliefs, races, genders, and many more things that may seem to separate us all. We believe Ramadan is an opportunity to embrace these differences, to unify and stand stronger together as a community. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown particularly that we as humans in our very nature turn to each other for hope. With hundreds of thousands of us signing up to volunteer in the first few hours that the NHS announced its search for volunteers, to our unified claps for heroes, there's just a few examples that illustrate that we see strength, love, and community in our diversity. Not as individuals, but as a community, we strive and succeed together. And this social processing of coming together shows that we need one another, even more, to learn empathy and care, to unify firstly as Manchester and then as the whole of the United Kingdom. I'd like to reiterate that our collective efforts to halt the virus and its impact at every frontier have shown that we are stronger together. This display of hope is an embodiment of our cohesive society, as our panel here today shows. As we love our neighbours free of prejudice, as we love one another. Now, without further ado and stealing any more time for our distinguished community faith leaders and our guest family, I'd like to pass on my virtual microphone to our first speaker, Reverend Canon Rawlings, Director of the Manchester Centre for Christianity and Islam.
Good evening. It's a great joy and privilege to be with you. I think the question is the one I think we're looking at tonight is, where is God in the face of COVID-19? And it is a great privilege to share with on the stage with friends tonight. It's a sadness actually that that we can't meet in iftar meals and in other gatherings this year. Last year I had the joy of 8 iftars as I traveled around various mosques of an evening. It was good, and I will miss that. And I'm also missing our other guest, who doesn't seem to be here, who's a very long time friend. We've shared many platforms together, and even we've been on holiday together, Cakar and I. So it is a bit sad that we're not seeing him here today. But thanks so much for the opportunity to reflect on this present crisis from a Christian perspective. I think it's really, really important that we, people of faith, speak into this situation, seeking to bring in a deeper perspective that enables reflection on the issues that many, many people, I suspect, have never really previously considered. Of course, we're concerned about isolation. We're concerned about keeping a distance while we're seeking to get to grips with this nasty COVID. I have a friend who's recovering from it, and it is a long process. She is really suffering quite a lot. But my friends who are not Christians are asking me, where is the Christian God? In the midst of their sufferings, in the midst of the enormous disruption caused by this virus right across the world, how can this God of love, as Christians claim, allow such fear and pain. Well, there can be no easy answer, trite or simple, and I'm not going to try to give one. However, in this deeply painful disruption, I want to affirm three things that I, as a Christian leader, believe. For while there may be no easy answers to the question of why, we humans, whom God has given us a mandate to care and to work for our world, in Genesis 2:15, we must ask the question of ourselves. Instead of passing the blame onto the Almighty, we must ask ourselves some questions. How have we allowed such things to happen? If, as is suspected, this infection passed from bats to humans via intermediaries, then the questions of how we care for our world and how we care for our fellow creatures for whom God has given us responsibility must be asked. It is too easy to pass the buck. And as we come out of this global crisis, we must ask ourselves some really challenging questions. And it will take strong, visionary, and wise leadership to grasp the situation, so that rather than letting the blame culture find scapegoats, the world takes responsibility for our God-given commission to care for this creation. And as our scriptures tell us, when God created it, he saw that it was good. Secondly, Christianity believes that God understands and identifies with suffering and pain. We believe that God the Father, who gave his one and only Son, John 3:16, to the world in order to rescue our broken and fallen world, felt the full force of grief as he watched his beloved suffer the cruelest of deaths on the cross. As the only way, we believe, for this distorted creation that he continues to love to be restored into that relationship for which we were created with him. Time and again, our scriptures witness to God's presence with and his love for the brokenhearted, the sick, the lonely, the poor, and the destitute. The Christian God feels for his people, stands alongside them, and brings comfort and healing. And for Christians, it is the resurrection of Jesus, which we have just celebrated at Easter, that gives us both the assurance that the risen Jesus is still alive and with us, but also the hope for the future, with the promise of God's creation, his recreation of the new heaven and the new earth, for which the resurrection of Jesus is a foretaste. But thirdly, this pandemic provides us with a God-given opportunity to stop and ask the question, what kind of a world do we want to live in? In the UK, the gods of our secular society have been shown up as powerless and irrelevant, as useless. With our shops closed, our sports stadiums empty, with the gods of fashion and materialism seen merely as vanity, without real value. It is an opportunity to ask the questions about what really matters in life. For many, we're hearing of a rediscovery of the values of family life, spending time together, of love for each other, which pressures of work, the influence of society to earn more, to be busy, can easily crowd out. We are hearing of selfless giving in caring for the vulnerable and the housebound, let alone that costly devotion that our health and caring services are giving to the weakest and sickest in our communities. These last few weeks, as I've walked into my garden at night, the view in the sky is suddenly opening up. I live just south of Manchester city centre, and for many years now, each night has been a haze through which the moon tries to appear with an occasional star. Now, with less traffic, producing less pollution, I can actually see the stars. God's handiwork, beautifully displayed before the world. Could this be a time to radically rethink some of the fundamental issues which drive our world? We will have to ask hard questions about how we treat the millions of animals with whom we share this world, if we are not to see a regular repeat of these kinds of viruses. Is it time to consider how we take care of this planet that God has given us? Responsibility for, to stop exploiting it in a mad scramble for wealth, often at the expense of the poorest. Perhaps it's time to ask questions of how we exploit the poorest. The Christian scriptures are clear that God hears the cry of the poor and the oppressed. And the Christian message of hope in the resurrection of Jesus is good news for the poor. Issues of fairness and justice must become the guiding principles in how the rich North builds relationships with the poor South. The removal of crippling debt repayments, trade tariffs, and other injustices. The overriding issue of our time, how to stop exploiting the world's resources such that we are destroying our planet. Plastics, pollution, rising sea levels, overcrowding, just to name a few of the issues. Let alone the wars, where selfish leaders seek to gain control over their citizens and others. In the end, they will be judged both by history and by the Almighty. So where is God in this present crisis? We Christians believe that God is here with us, alongside us, that through his Holy Spirit, he brings comfort to the oppressed and the hurt, the bereaved and the dying. And as we open our lives to him in Christ, we will find him filling our lives with hope and courage to face the future with all its uncertainty and insecurity. But as he calls us to face our responsibilities for the future, to make bold and radical decisions that will change direction and bring about the values and qualities that he has made us to live by, we need leaders in our world willing to take such steps that will be costly, sacrificial, that will look for the best for all, not just for their own people, but for all. We have an opportunity to rethink and dream of a better world, God's world. And that, my friends, is my prayer, that out of this will emerge leaders of clear vision who will have the courage to lead in new and godly directions. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend, for firstly clearly noting the importance of the whole pandemic for people of faith, affirming their responsibility and care for creation, and messages of healing amidst both the turmoil of the pandemic and the current world that we live in. So thank you very much. Now we're on to our next speaker, Rabbi Robyn Ashworth-Steen from the Manchester Reformed Synagogue.
Hi. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this special gathering, and Ramadan Mubarak to you all. It's great to be here. And I love the opening, Aisha, of a special time of Ramadan, of thinking of strength and love and community through a diversity. Just gorgeous. So with that in mind, I'm going to offer some thoughts from the Jewish tradition and from my community in Manchester. So I also thought I'd start with Genesis and the creation story, so sharing something already together. So verse 27 of the first chapter says, I'll read it in Hebrew first, Vayivra Elohim et ha'adam b'tsalmo, b'tselem Elohim bara oto, zachar u'nekeva bara otam. And it translates as God created man, person, in God's image. In the image of God, God created him, male and female, God created them. So it's a complicated verse. We won't get into the gender and what was created, and we've got maybe more time to have a conversation about that. But I'm sharing it because of that principle that all the faiths share about being created in the image of God, of having divinity in each one of us. Early on in the lockdown, one of my colleagues shared that really we shouldn't use the term social distancing, but physical distancing and social connectedness. And I think this gathering shows that. I think it's amazing how in lockdown we've been able to connect despite the physical distance and the darkness that we're facing as a people and individually. Whether that's the power of a phone call, the power of a Zoom gathering across faiths and nationalities and, geography as well, or whether it's the surprising intimacy you can get on a funeral over Zoom. We've been doing so many in my community. Someone shared with me at a Greater Manchester Citizens event, a quote by Martin Luther King that helps me build towards the point I'm making. Martin Luther King wrote, "We're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." I am really feeling and understanding that principle more than ever. I've always known that each of us contains divinity, sparks of divinity, and that as humans we're all connected. But I think until now, until I've seen that borders really have aren't real. The virus has transcended it all. We're all suffering the same in similar ways as well, that we're all part of something greater than ourselves. As John Donne, the poet, said, no person is an island, really understanding that we're connected. For me, this is what God means. And the name God doesn't do God justice. It doesn't work particularly, can't hold everything that we all think. As a prism, we all have different ways of understanding God. In Judaism, we have, and the same as Islam, so many different names for God, different aspects of God. For me, divinity, divine sparks are found in relationships, in being connected to something greater than ourselves. Sometimes I understand God, or a better name for God really, or a better expression of God is a breath of just being connected, breathing in and breathing out. In Judaism, God is less a noun, but more a verb, a being, and not a being, a verb, a process more than a being as well. So for me, I've never really understood a personal God that is involved day to day with what I'm doing, but really is found in breath, in my connection with something greater than myself, and in relationship with other. Part of that connectedness, of recognizing that we're connected across humanities and through our diversity, is a decision that we made actually in progressive Judaism, in Reform and Liberal Judaism, to say that no mourners can come to a funeral. It's a very brave and a very difficult decision. And what underlies it is compassion and understanding that we're connected, and trying to find divinity and compassion in the decisions we make as religious leaders. It's a great loss, obviously, but within everything that we're finding, and building on what was already said, there's possibility for liberation and connectedness as well. I thought I'd end with a little allegory, a story that we share across the traditions, actually. It comes up in lots of different places. It has been attributed to Rabbi Chaim of Rom-Shishok, but I think there are loads of other sources. And it's the allegory of the long spoons. I'm sure you know it. And it's a parable that shows the difference between heaven and hell. In Judaism, we don't really have concepts, particularly of heaven and hell, but it's the promised land, the future that we're all working towards. And the allegory goes that in each, hell or heaven, the inhabitants are given access to food, but the utensils are too unwieldy to serve oneself. They're too long. You just simply can't serve yourself. So in hell, what we call hell, the people can't cooperate, and consequently everyone starves. But in heaven, the diners feed one another across the table and they're satisfied. So something for me in creating together with whatever we understand God to be, a partnership of being satisfied, of being together and finding heaven even in the darkest of times together.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Firstly, for your kind words, sharing your beautiful prayer in Hebrew and then in English, and also the story of the long spoons, reminding us that, you know, we may have that physical distance, but in our hearts, we are hopefully closer than ever before. Now, before we go on to our next speaker, we'd like to share our mini video project that we've been doing over this pandemic period, showing how our diverse community of volunteers and friends have been spending their time staying home.
Hi, I'm Frances, and during lockdown I'm trying to find lots of creative things to do with baby Daniel, and we've had lots of good ideas from my friend Laura for music and sensory activities to do together.
Hi, I'm Nancy Platts, leader of Brighton and Hove City Council. During lockdown I've been upcycling this little desk that I bought from the flea market in Kemp Town.
Hi there, I'm Jane, and I'm using this COVID crisis as an opportunity to get on with some painting, and where could be better than one's own back garden.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome. This is Temkin Riaz. During lockdown COVID-19, I'm at home, but I still keep my routine in after 5. Then I'll be on, FaceTime and WhatsApp and Skype, etc., talking to the children, grandchildren, and friends. So that's me. Yeah, lockdown. Keep yourself healthy and wealthy. Your health is your wealth.
I'm staying home making English paper-pieced patchwork quilts. Here's the one I'm working on at the moment, made of old curtain fabrics. There's some of the papers. And this is one I made a while ago from old shirts. It's a great way to recycle fabrics, and it's also a very good way of staying calm and creative.
Assalamu alaikum. My name's Ajaib Hussain. I live in Rochester. I came out here to Pakistan in Saad, Kashmir. End of February, actually. So people are occupying themselves with reading, zikr, Quran, but also daily life goes on. So this is what it's all about here.
I'm Max Farah. My escape from the lockdown is the beautiful park in Leeds called Roundhay Park and looking at the swans.
My name's Annalisa Dodds. I live in Oxford, where I'm one of the members of Parliament. I've been asked to take part in this project by one of my constituents. I think as we stay at home, it's really important that we look out for others. And I've been so impressed by all the work that's going on to do that, whether it's ringing an elderly neighbour or offering to help somebody out with their shopping. There's so much that communities are doing together. Let's keep that going, even after we get out of this crisis.
Hi everyone, my name is Iffy, and this is a quick message just to say thank you to everyone who has been supporting their communities, looking after the vulnerable and supporting the NHS. And please, please, please continue to stay at home so it can enable us to fight coronavirus and flatten the curve.
So thank you for watching the video with us. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. It's always lovely and nice to see what others are doing and how they're spending their time. Now we're on to our next speaker, one of the directors of the Summer Education Society, Hamza Cakar, who will share some of his thoughts and reflections.
Good evening, everyone. Ramadan Mubarak. My name is Hamza Cakar. I work as a director at Summit Education Society. We have got about 60 families in Greater Manchester. We do our activities through these families. There is also a little group of Turkish families live in Liverpool. We are in touch with them. Many of these families have come from Turkey in recent years as asylum and refugee. I would like to talk about what did we do during pandemic and what are we doing now as Summit Education Society. We help with food to the families in our community, especially vulnerable groups, COVID-19. The charity organization Time to Help from London help us with this. We thank them very much. They really help us for this opportunity. We continue to make our organizations online. We have weekly meetings with our members. There are programs with spiritual content and informative for adults. For these programs, we get help from online Hizmet platform. This keep us strong on these days, you know. We thank them too, online Hizmet platform. However, for the children, we had weekend school at our center for age 6-10 group before pandemic. We continue this as online lessons with our volunteer teachers. At the same time, online mentoring activities continue for 11-16 age group. These programs are really very useful for our children because they don't go to school, you know, and they are bored because they stay at home. It's good opportunity for them, for their family. They have the chance to meet with their friends who are the same age group. It's very important to be in touch in this difficult time we live in. Supporting and helping each other is also very, very important. We are trying to do this as Summit Education Society. We are trying to do our best. We are continue our activities. Thanks for listening. It's a short speech. I just tried to talk about our activities in Manchester.
Thank you very much, Hamza, for explaining and sharing the crucial work your society is doing to help the most vulnerable members in society in Manchester, and the educational facilities, mentoring facilities that you're also engaging with in your wider community. So thank you very much. And now we are on to our next speaker, Councillor Amna, Saad, Omar, Abdullatif from the Greater Manchester Ardwick ward.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. Assalamu alaikum to all. It's interesting that it was around this time after I was literally elected as a councillor in Ardwick that I was invited to join you in Iftar in Manchester. So it's really an honour to be back, even though it is very virtual this time. But I hope that next year we will all be physically together in the same space. It's obviously been very uncertain and unsettling times that we're currently living under. And I think we've often been made to believe over the last month or so that the corona pandemic impacts us all in the same way or to the same extent. And unfortunately, this has been far from the truth. Inequalities are simply being entrenched further in our society through this pandemic. And I knew that the reality for many people, particularly those that I represent in Ardwick, but also across the city, that their realities was going to be changed for an uncertain amount of time. Those that were living with precarious work, those who worked in the hospitality industry, which has really completely stopped to some extent, those who have furloughed, have lost part of their incomes or all of their incomes, alongside those residents who have always needed additional support from our services. Many of those have seen a reduction in the support networks that they've had. But also not forgetting our key workers who are expected to go into work often uncertain and afraid of what that actually means, working long hours in order to support us and protect us. And as important as it is to celebrate our heroes and the work that they do, it's also vital for us to ask questions about their working conditions, about their safety, about how they're coping and what they're doing, because I think that is important for all of us. It is no surprise to me that we've seen a huge imbalance in the number of deaths, particularly in minoritized communities. Often those hold those low-level key worker roles that we have been told are so vital at this time, our nurses, our care workers, our delivery drivers. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge why that is the case and to ask that this is investigated in order for us to really have a clear understanding of why it is that there is this disproportionate impact on certain communities over others. I know that the Mayor of London has called for an investigation through the Equality Watchdog to investigate this issue. Because actually, when we look at all the other characteristics, such as age or disability and so on, that is not even having the same impact. So it's vital for us to get these answers during this time. But I wanted to also talk about kind of our local response, because since the lockdown, or even before the lockdown has started, I was asking these questions because I wanted to understand how best that I can support the local community that I'm representing. And one of the things that was mentioned to me was the setup of these mutual aid groups across the country that exist across Greater Manchester. But there wasn't one for Ardwick. And so I decided to set that up on Facebook. The joys of technology, finally being able to use it more thoroughly. But we set this mutual aid group for Ardwick, and it was extended then to also support the Longside ward, which is connected to us, as an emergency response to the COVID crisis as we went into lockdown. And through this, we saw a huge amount of local support from a number of our volunteers and our local organisations, housing groups, all coming together to see what we could do as a collective, that this was no longer an isolated issue that one organisation or two organisations can deal with, but actually that this needed a much more response from all of us to be making sure that we are utilising our resources. And I particularly liked how you ended, Rabbi Robyn, about that story of the long spoons and actually how we're sharing, because the resources are there. It's just about how we make sure that we're sharing all of those resources to ensure that they reach the people that need to be reached. And this sense of community, of really connecting with others at this time has been incredible to see. And what we've achieved as a group of volunteers has been immense. And if I just kind of talk through some of the different things that we've set up and done, we've set up, for instance, a local phone line that is completely supported through a volunteer rota system every day, who take the calls in order to support people who are vulnerable with food provision, but they also act as advisors to signpost our local residents to organisations that we're aware of to help with other issues such as benefits or council tax or any of the concerns that they have, their mental health, their well-being, if they just need somebody to speak to on the phone. So it's created a much bigger work just from setting up one phone line that is very restrictive in terms of the area that it covers. Because we have to be realistic about how much we can do, and each area has its own mutual group working in different ways. But we've also created, a basic website which can be translated into numerous languages with those support details to ensure that families in our diverse communities are able to find the information that they need. we set up a GoFundMe page, which we managed initially to raise well over £2,000 in order to start the purchasing of food to parcels for families, often with very basic supplies, but still enough for families to be able to at least make meals from. And we also set up a hot food provision for those that were living in temporary accommodation with no access to a kitchen to be able to cook with, or those that were very vulnerable who've lost carers because of the short staffing issue. And so we've started to come up with solutions for things as they were coming up to us, and supporting sometimes individuals and sometimes groups of people. But at our core, at the very beginning, we wanted to ensure that we were really connecting all of the organizations, really sharing our resources, really ensuring that all of the communities that are represented in our areas were thought about, that they were an integral part of the volunteers, but also the type of food that we were providing, because not all of us eat the same types of food. And so we started to think about actually what is the basic diet for somebody from an Asian background? What is the basic diet of somebody from an African background? What are the things that they're used to cooking with, that their families are used to cooking with, and making sure that that was as culturally and religiously appropriate as we could manage within the constraints of obviously this quite emergency provision of support. And we also had, in terms of our volunteers, people who could speak between us about 15 different languages. And this has been an immense support because many of the people who were ringing in didn't speak English or didn't have the language to be able to explain what their need was. And often we would look to some of these volunteers to find out the detail of how we could support this individual going forward. And so that's been a huge support. And I would urge anyone who is listening, if you do live in Ardwick or Longsight or in the surrounding area and you're interested in getting involved in our mutual aid group, do get in contact. My details are public on the council website, and we're constantly looking for volunteers and people to come and join with the work that we're doing as it evolves. We've currently got even a blog running about some of the volunteers, who they are, their stories, why they're supporting our mutual aid group, all the different organizations, who they are, and the importance of everyone's work during this crisis. And you know, and this is, of course, these are all amazing things that we see during crisis, and particularly one like this, where so many of us are at home and using technology is still allowing us to connect and achieve some of these incredible things. I mean, literally our volunteer network is run through WhatsApp, different groups doing different things, connecting to other groups doing different things, and it manages to work, which is great to see. But this, you know, to me, this has always been very much the spirit of Manchester, how we deal with things as they come up, organically being able to just put ourselves out there in order to resolve issues in our communities. And I know particularly for many of us, including myself, Ramadan has been difficult and unusual this year, particularly in our ability to congregate or to see our wider family, to be able to break our fast together, to pray together. I think have had huge impacts on many Muslims, particularly on their mental health, for some of the older residents that we're seeing, who finding it very difficult not to be in a mosque, you know, not to be physically with others around them. So even though, you know, they're being checked up on and their children and grandchildren and so on are calling, it's just that loss of that environment, though, you know, the environment that Ramadan brings when you are physically together in that space. But also I think, you know, this has also afforded us, this time has afforded us many opportunities, you know, our ability to give sadaqah and give charity at a time when it's so needed in our communities, both locally as well as globally, because, you know, everyone's experiencing this pandemic to some degree around the world. And many of us perhaps have more time than we did when we'd be working long hours during Ramadan month in previous years, that we can actually use now for prayer. And being with our families, the reading of the Quran, making our du'as, and giving back to our communities. So I think there's lots of opportunities there, even though there's obviously many challenges. And what I would end with is, I think the Reverend kind of said something very similar to this around, this kind of what kind of society we want to see out of this crisis, and what does our new normal look like now? Because I don't think we can return back to the way that we've always done things, but actually what did we learn from this? How do we move forward? How do we make things better? How do we deal with the injustices and the inequalities that are so plain to see now with this crisis? How do we move that forward? And I think these are really important questions. And I go back to the point that I made when I started. Please ask questions. Please, let's not accept the fact that these things just happen and that we're in an emergency situation, and so we shouldn't be asking awkward questions. Actually, it's this time now that we should be asking some awkward questions and making sure that those around us are kept safe during this time. And I want to be really clear in light of the very unclear and very vague guidance that we've had recently from the government. Please do continue staying at home, and please, look after yourself. If you have any symptoms, please stay at home and don't connect with anyone else physically outside of your own immediate family, and seek support if you need support. Let's not be vague about what this pandemic, the impact that this pandemic has had. It is very real, and we need to be very clear on that. So thank you very much to everyone. It's great to be with all of you today and listening to each of you.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Amna, for highlighting extensively the inequalities in our society that many groups face, including minority ethnic groups, essential workers, and reminding us of the large amount of work that needs to be done, and the work that you've been doing in your local community, from mutual aid groups to the phone line that you mentioned, the mental health services to food packages, and especially, the multilingual services, which I think is crucial to helping wider society at large get through this. I'm sure that if we do have any viewers at the moment who do live in the local area, they will be in contact to help and provide their own volunteer services. So thank you very much. And now we are on to the final speaker of today, which is a family based in Manchester. Elif Kanlola and her family will be sharing how they experienced Ramadan during the pandemic.
Hello everyone, thank you for giving this opportunity to talk about my family and our most important month in a year. My name is Elif. We came to the UK 1 year ago with our kids, a girl and 3 boys. We actually adapted the life here very quickly. All my children goes to school. My eldest, he got accepted to a local college. He wants to study biology. My second son, he's playing football for a local league team. His dream is to play for Liverpool one day. Coronavirus and the following recommendations of social distancing have put us all in a challenging situation, but we are, like everyone else, trying to do our best to keep safe and make it easier for the kids, especially for my youngest kids who are only 6 and 8. They love daily walks in the countryside and playing in the playgrounds, of course, but it wasn't easy to tell them why we can't go out whenever we want, especially during Ramadan. They were looking forward to family visits and long dinners, but they seem they're okay with it for now. So I would like to talk about Ramadan, which is the most sacred month of the year for us as Muslims. During this month, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the first verses of the Quran, our holy book. our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, when the month of Ramadan starts, the gates of heaven are opened and the gates of hell are closed and the devils are chained. So in light of this, we devote ourselves to our faith and try to come closer to Allah during the Ramadan. In this holy month, we don't eat or drink between dawn and sunset. It's called fasting, oruç. Children, pregnant women, the elderly, and those who are ill or who are traveling don't have to fast. We usually wake up very early to eat a pre-dawn meal called sahur and break our fast with a meal called iftar. We usually host large iftars dinners, especially for the poor and needy, but this year it's a lot different than what we used to do before. It's less festive since mosques are closed and social gatherings are limited. However, Muslims all around the world make a special effort to connect with their communities and reach out to people who need help. Fasting includes abstaining from immoral acts and anger. Other acts of worship such as prayers, reading the Quran, and charity are encouraged during the holy month because it's meant to be a time of spiritual discipline. To me, it's a time to increase one's patience, closeness to God, and generosity towards others. We spent this month with our family and loved ones. It's a big celebration and joy for us. At the end of Ramadan, we hold a big 3-day celebration called Eid al-Fitr. It's a big festival for the breaking of fast, and everyone comes together for big meals, with family and friends, exchange presents. So we generally have a lovely time during Eid al-Fitr. I wish a happy Ramadan to all Muslims around the world. I wish you, your loved ones and dear friends, a safe passage through this difficult period. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Elif. I also know that you volunteer with the Dialogue Society in Manchester. So could you just give a few words about how your work may have been impacted and what you're doing at the same time?
Yeah, we started online sessions between a local charity and Turkish families in Manchester. We chat over Zoom for about 40 minutes every week, and this helps families improve their English and adapt the British way of life. It also gives understanding of culture to both sides. And we also volunteer for the food banks. We deliver food to the ones who are self-isolating. We shop or post mail for them. Yeah, it's about that.
Thank you very much. It's not just about that. I mean, it's extensive work. It's crucial work that you're doing as a community. So thank you very much. Now, thank you all for being here, both the speakers and the viewers. Just as a means of some closing remarks, I'd like to extend the microphone to our speakers for a final time to see if anyone has any questions or comments for any of the other speakers. I mean, it's not been very dialogue-like as we've had to take turns. So if anyone has any questions or comments for anyone else.
Yeah, I would love to say something. It's been a real privilege to listen to all of you. So thank you so much. I, in my little bit, said that I didn't really know who or what God is and struggle with the terminology sometimes myself, but I know what God wants, which is a world that you have all shown, and the work that you're doing on the ground, the volunteer work in Ardwick and alongside in Manchester with the Dialogue Society, the summer education. It's really great to hear all of that and to hear the call to action that I heard really clearly from our councillor about making sure that we understand why people are disproportionately affected, asking the hard questions. I love that. And Judaism is all about justice and action. So also hearing from the Reverend about a radical rethink of the society we're in, I couldn't agree more. That has to be like living wage for care workers, equality with all different minorities, more social housing, you name it. But really, this is a chance to try and level the world that we're in. So thank you all for that call to action and for painting a world that I want to live in. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'd just like to add, and I guess re-emphasize, I do think this is a kind of rethink, reboot moment that in history, really, where we can stop and ask the hard questions. What do we want for each other? What kind of society and people do we want to be? Where do we want our children to grow up in, and grandchildren, and all the rest? And I think it's worth us. It'll be sacrificial. It's worth us stopping and asking those questions, and to do that now, as we've been encouraged, because once this thing seems over, everybody will begin to get busy again, and then it's just a matter of survival without stopping and thinking. Here we have a fantastic opportunity together to think, how can we be a society that really both honors God in creation, but also produces the best for each other. So may God bless each one of us, keep us safe, and I do wish my Muslim friends a really good time. I know you're about halfway through Ramadan, I think, and that Eid will be a great celebration. So have a good time.
Thank you. Can I just add, I think both of you beautifully summarized, I think, everything here, and I echo your sentiments. I really enjoyed just being able to listen and really clarify some of the thinking that I've had over the last few weeks. But could I add whether I could just call out the number for support, the local helpline and the Central Manchester helpline, which is for all of Manchester wards. So the local helpline for anyone who's living in Ardwick or Longsight, if you are looking for support or just to be signposted, is 0793 026 1920. And then for the Manchester Central Support Hub, it is 0800 234 6123. So please do get in touch and do refer people. If you are worried about somebody, you need some additional advice, you need some help for them, then, you know, a referral or just to let us know, somebody can get in touch with them. And yeah, just really happy Ramadan to everyone. Please stay safe, please stay indoors, and hopefully we will see each other very soon and be able to share some food and drink in celebration of everything that everyone's been involved in. So thank you.
Thank you everyone once again for the dialogue that we've just had coming together, illustrated that we are actually united in thought through our diversity, and that our different faiths or different beliefs don't provide us a barrier to that. I think it's been a very fruitful discussion dialogue. I mean, I've enjoyed it personally on creating a more equal and inclusive society. But I think the spoke has just begun. We've just begun talking about this, and we all need to play a part in creating that better society, illustrating, you know, that we can both defeat this pandemic and also work for a more positive and inclusive future. So thank you very much, everyone, once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay safe. God bless you.
You too, everyone.
Thanks so much. That was really wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks.